So Jack has said horses are his favorite things. Gabe, actually there's a video for what Gabe made. It's a gigantic like screw, like with a Phillips head screwdriver. It was a giant one. There's a video for it somewhere on our YouTube channel. And Sarah is still thinking about hers. So if you're wondering why Gabe is just pinching, what he's doing is that the part that was originally still connected to that blowpipe, that glass was a little bit thicker. This glass on the end had been stretched out and shaped, but it was still the same consistency when it was attached to that blowpipe. So they're going to pull it out, and they might either trim that off, or you'll see them just knock it off. Now, when they transferred this piece, when they broke it off, you probably noticed Gabe take the tweezers or those jacks, dip them in water, and dip that water on that connection point between that blowpipe and the decanter. So what that did was cause tiny little stress fractures. So when he hits that blowpipe, it just breaks free. So to give you an idea of how this glass feels as it cools down, how many of you like to eat taffy? A couple of you. So you know taffy, you can kind of bend it and poke it a little bit, but it comes to a point where it snaps. The cooler the glass gets, the more similar to that consistency it is. In the beginning, obviously, when it is piping hot and orange and you know, like, it's more like honey. So that tool Gabe has in his hand right now, those are jacks. Now the end of that isn't going to be perfectly smooth, and if you were out here when Kristen was out here, that is our cold working artist, and actually that noise in the background, that is her in her workshop right now. So when these are finished, in order to drink out of these or dump water from them and not cut your face off, that is who it goes to. She will smooth these out, she will refine the bottom of these so they stand up nice and clean. There is a lot of teamwork here on the hot shop floor. Imagine one person down here trying to do all this by themselves. So these are our lovely office ladies. I don't know what they all do, but they all have the greatest office job in the world where if they want to leave, they can come down and check out what we're doing. Did we have any more questions? Yes, my little friend. Why is this building so tall? So if you've noticed, this building it's got a little bit of like leaning tower vibes going on. That's on purpose. Now, this was built after a wigwam or to be reminiscent of a wigwam, which is very even, it's not tilted. But a wigwam was originally used to burn excess wood, and now we have things like particle board, and so we don't really do that anymore. However, the reason this building is a little wonky is when you tip it over a little bit, it gives you more floor space. It was nice to have this design here, though, because then the heat rises nicely up. Anybody else? What are the ingredients of the glass? Silica sand, soda ash, and lime. Do we have a slide of what is in glass? Can we see that slide, please? Oh, let's give him a hand. Yes, there are three ingredients in glass. Can we please see that slide with the, I believe it's that silica sand slide. They might be looking for it, but I'm like 99% sure. There are different types of glass, though I do know that. Like your Pyrex at home, Pyrex is actually the brand of borosilicate glass that they are using. So the difference, this is soft glass. With boro, you can obviously heat it to like 400 degrees in your oven and immediately stick it in the freezer, and it's not going to suffer from thermal shock. Soft glass, however, don't do that to that. That's not going to. Crystal, in fact, is also a form of glass, but crystal has lead in it. So there are two furnaces. Now, you mean where Jack is at is the furnace. That is where the glass is. What is next to it, that is actually the glory hole. So that's the reheating chamber. There's no glass in there. Now, part of that is if someone has to gather from here and they need something else like a punty and they're doing another layer or another overlayer of glass, they can't both be in that furnace at the same time. So it just kind of helps make things a little more smooth. But sometimes if you come on the third Thursday, Hilltop artists are here. So you will have, each bench has a different thing going on. So if we only had one furnace and one glory hole going, I don't know how we get that done. So now we begin a whole new process. So we're talking about things being symmetrical and asymmetrical, and hopefully we still have the slide. Can we see some of Anne Wallstrom's work from her last visit with us to kind of give an example of things that can be asymmetrical? So some of these pieces are, but when you get to the shapes of her stones, a lot of her work was inspired by going on walks by the beach and seeing seaweed and different things along the beach. So those are her stones to the right. And that little flat piece was actually what would stand, and the top part, that stone shape, was what was on top, and those were very irregular. And by the way, when you are wandering around, you will notice on that little square of info by the artwork, it will tell you what has been made here at MOG and what hasn't been made here. So these probably till tomorrow morning, but when I first asked about the annealing process, our other artist who isn't here had explained to me that the telescope lens, I can't remember which one, but obviously the ones that are like the length of this building, those take 1.5 years to cool down, and one of them cracked anyway. So the bigger the object, the longer it's going to take to anneal. But what's open right now, those were made yesterday, I think. I could be wrong, but I feel like since we're using this one today, that was the one they used the day before. So those are made yesterday, probably, and they're ready to go right now. Which, by the way, I can't say you can have those, but there's very similar in the gift shop. We have cake pans. There's tons of stuff that they have made right here that you can take home with you. Or if you live here, you come in September, remember some of these pieces being made and you will see them. If you do decide to wander around after this, so it got a little ruined. This is mine. They're not very good. I can't speak for this. This is done by Walt Lieberman. He is the other MC. He's here most of the time. Amazing, amazing artist. Any of these slides that we pull up that are in chalk, he has done. I believe he has 1 or 2 pieces himself here in our museum, and he has a couple pieces at the museum, Tacoma Museum of Art. Now, who you're seeing over here is Jack, and he's part of Hilltop Artists. And right now there is an exhibition called Gather over at the Tacoma Museum of Art. I think that's going on until September, but it is all of the Hilltop Artist alumni that made their own pieces to showcase. So if you wander around here, definitely look for Walt's name. Remember, Sarah and Gabe are the other resident artists here today. I don't know where, but I know they have to have art in the museum in here somewhere. So how many of you learned something today? Me too, it's my first day. It's really like my 7th day. Not really, I did not go to school. I learn almost at the same rate that you learn listening to me. I am lucky enough to blow glass with some of the programs here, but I've made a suck bowl, which what you do is you blow a bubble and you suck the bubble in, and boom, there's your bowl. I know I'm a professional now. I could do this. No. But no, I am lucky enough to do some of those classes, but I do not do what they are doing. Something that is similar, though, this weekend, depending on how long you have been sitting here. So there's a fusing class from 11 to 4. I think it's going to be in that education room out here. But yeah, go ask about that at the front desk. 11 to 4 all weekend. It's fun for our little faces. So why do they blow into the glass? It is to inflate it. Well, what are they going to do? Pump air into? I forget what that's called. Like what he just did. So that is not. That looks really easy, but that's not as easy as that. Like I've heard about. So we have a program called Hot Shop Heroes, and it is where veterans are taught to blow glass. And one of the instructors was saying he taught his brother how to do it, and the first try he just did it. And apparently it's not that easy. So what the air does is as long as you keep the air in there with your finger on it, it expands the bubble. And as soon as you take your air off, that's it. And actually, a fun fact, because I asked this, I wondered if, I have a morbid sense of curiosity, I wondered if anyone has ever been shoved into the glory hole. But like back in the day, we had like dirt floors, you know, there wasn't a lot going on in the world. In my mind, I'm like, you know, you're gonna fight your competition, you just shove them in there. Now, Walt, who we were talking about, he is the encyclopedia of knowledge. Something he told me is what gaffers would do if they didn't like their assistant when they were blowing on the blowpipe, they would knock it back. No one's done that here. They all like each other, but that used to happen. Can we possibly get that camera in the powder box, please? So the powder box is behind me. It is this little box right here. There we go. So that is color powder. Now, but that is glass. So you do not want to inhale it. So that is why they go into that corner where there's a ventilation on top. You do not want to breathe in powder glass. Someone had asked something about some of the risk factors on the floor, and that is one of them. I believe this is going to be like a purple and a yellow. We'll find out. It's right about the yellow, wrong about everything else. It's going to be lime green and yellow. It is going to be a decanter. So every year there are limited edition goblets and decanters they make for this fundraiser. Fundraiser, auction. So new faces. So yes, we are making decanters. If you are familiar with what the museum does, you know in September they do that Red Hot event, and these are being made for that. I have our little, it's our mood board for some of the colors and the aesthetic that they were kind of wanting for that. Another one is this rainbow little picture right there. So yeah, this process is very similar to sifting your flour when you are baking at home. But you do not want to eat this. Personally, I feel like the hardest thing about watching this is it reminds you of candy. And actually, another way to color glass, these little pieces I have in my hand, they're called Marini. And they come from cross-sectioning pieces like this. So it's just pink and red encased in clear. And if you cross-section these, it would be clear with a little colored dot in the middle. But if you put a whole bowl of those together, they look like licorice or like really good candy. And actually, Marini was used to make this design on this one. So the outside of that piece was either blue or red, and they cross-sectioned it, and it was rolled to create this design. So lots and lots of different ways to add color. So we do have some new faces, and hello, my new faces. My name is Michelle. I will be your MC for the afternoon. While they're going back and forth, why don't we talk about some color? Now we just saw powder, which that is glass, that is pulverized glass. That is one way they add color. What I have in my hand is a color bar. Now they will heat these in these little trays. They might leave them in the garage, this big box in front of me. Or they will heat them in the reheating chamber. We might see a color overlay, we might not, but usually what happens with these bars is they heat them up and they will drop them over a clear bubble on a blowpipe. Can we actually see that color overlay slide, please? So if you imagine what I have in my hand is that blue color, you would drop this over that clear bubble and work its way around over all of it. And once it's completely covered, you add another layer of clear glass. So I have in my hand what is in that picture. So it looks like this entire piece is orange. But in reality, it's a thin little layer. And that is color overlay. So if we took this color bar, I really wish I could do this someday, but I don't think it's going to happen. Even if you smashed it, it would become colored frit. Now, I think personally that color frit looks like those little pebbles in the bottom of your aquarium, just like this. And all this color happens after the fact. All the glass we start with is colorless. why does some of our colored glass comes from Germany? It just depends on who makes it. I know some of the better colors come from Germany, but there are distribution centers in Seattle. So it just happens to be that that's the place that it all comes out of, but that doesn't mean that it's the only place it comes from. I know there's a couple others. I'm not entirely sure. So it looks kind of like cardboard, but it is actually your average New York Times that they have folded and dampened down. Which, if you collect newspapers and you keep telling yourself, I'm going to recycle them, and you just have a whole bunch in your garage, we will gladly take them and they will get used. I cannot remember her name, but the nicest lady came in, and she, I believe, is one of the main donors of our newspaper. Oh, sorry. I thought you questioned. And talking about colored glass, so where all the glass starts out of on the floor is these little tanks. I shouldn't say little, these large tanks. So I have one to my right, and the other one is on the other side. And they hold 1,000 pounds of molten glass, and it's all clear. Could you imagine if we had like 1,000 pounds of yellow? That would get really old. Now you can see on screen how hot it is when Gabe gets a little gather of glass, and to put into perspective how hot that is, if you are an avid baker or you like to use your oven a lot, you know the moment you open your oven and it just, so imagine that, but there's no cool. It's just, that is exactly what it's like when you're standing in front of there. So that coconut cuppy looking thing is not a coconut, it is fruit wood, and that is called a block. And the reason it is fruit wood burns slower. Oh, I saw Walt pass by. If you see a man in a striped shirt, that is Walt Lieberman. He is our other MC, and he is an amazing artist. He did this really cool gas square, and any of the slides you have seen so far that have chalk drawings, those are done by Walt. There's Walt. Hi, Walt. So that torch you saw is the fluffy torch, and that's about 2,000 degrees. So the reason that paddle is between Gabe's arm and that piece is because if you can see, that piece is bright orange. That is because it is hot. If that wasn't there, Gabe would probably have a really nice, fresh and smooth arm. And what we are seeing, so if my microphone is that blowpipe, they are working on the end of this piece. So they're shaping the base of it. Everything in glass is a little backwards. You start from the bottom and work your way up. If you noticed, at that connection point where this decanter meets the blowpipe, he kind of pinched this little neckline in there. Now, eventually, they have to work with the top of the piece, and they can't do that while it's still attached to another pipe. So once this has been shaped and they are finished with that, they're going to transfer it to another pipe. And that little pinch they did, that's exactly where that's going to break off. And to catch you up all of my new faces, so we are making decanters, similarly to this, sort of. Today's kind of a prototype tested out day. But they are for the Red Hot event we are doing in September. So when you see one of the artists get another pipe and that tiny little glass ball, you know it's about time to transfer the piece over. So Gabe just made the bottom of that decanter, and Sarah is going to stick it to the bottom. And I remember we talked about that little pinch line that's going to get broken off. You're going to see Gabe get some water and kind of drip it over that spot. Now that's going to cause tiny stress fractures. So when he gives it a little bonk, it's going to break right off. It looks kind of sparkly from here. It's kind of sparkly from here. Looks kind of sparkly. Oh, there's bubbles in it. First, I thought this piece looked sparkly, but there are actually little bubbles in it. And there is a bucket of baking soda and water over here. And I just learned this today. If you put baking soda on glass, that little gas reaction will cause bubbles within the glass. There is the stick. Now we wait for the break. There we go. So now we have transferred that piece, and they were going to start to work on the top of this decanter. Now, it was a little bit thicker, so they're going to pull and stretch and probably trim a little bit of that excess. Any questions so far? What happens to the glass on the floor when they break it off? So I always like to ask to keep those pieces. However, they are little ticking time bombs. Yes, if you do not anneal that glass, it is going to suffer from thermal shock and just... However, if you see these little kegs on the floor, there's no beer in them, there's glass. So if it touches the floor, it's done. We can't like pick the Cheeto off and eat it at home. That's not how that works. But if you see them take a gather and they have a little bit too much, and what it looks like they might be pulling it from that keg, it's actually being dripped into that keg. All that glass does get recycled back into the furnace again, though. You had a face. Did you want to ask a question? And our new member on the floor, not new, new to you to see, so that is Nick. If you wondered who actually charges the furnace, who puts the glass in there, that is Nick. And somebody has to like maintain all this stuff behind here, right? That is also Nick. How old is this version of glassblowing? We have been messing with glass for about 4,000 years, but we've only been blowing it and manipulating it the way we have been for like 2,000 years, like half that. I wish I could get more in depth with that, but I'm not the encyclopedia of glass. Walt, the other MC, is totally the encyclopedia of glass, though. I do know, though, that the fact that they are sitting down as they're doing this, that is more of a Venetian style of glass. In the Czech Republic, they just stand like the whole time and do this. And I'm like, that doesn't sound very comfortable at all. So, good and bad news. Bad news, this is the last new prototype for these decanters. The good news, we're still going to be making things. Next, we are going to make the tops for these cake plates. And I will let you in on a hot shop floor secret. When someone goes to this corner and starts to suit up and looks like they're going to walk into an oven, it is time for this piece to be finished. And that gear is very important because you don't just like hot potato this piece to the annealer. That would not end very well for anybody. But this is going to go to our left. That is the annealing oven. It's about twice the heat of your oven at home. And these pieces are going to sit in there until probably tomorrow morning or about the same time tomorrow. And it will slowly drop the temperature safely to prevent thermal shock. If we just let this piece sit here in front of us, in less than 30 minutes, it's going to poof. Let's give him a hand. If you are paying attention to all these little colored pieces of glass that dropped, if you hear something crack, it's one of those pieces. So you got to see the end of one thing, and you can see the start of a whole entirely new piece. And speaking of that cake pan in general, if you really, really, really want one of these, there are like 10 of them in the gift shop right now. You can't have these ones. There's other ones you can have. So color, all the color. Okay, we do have new faces, so sorry if you have to hear this over again. I don't think any of you are, except like 3 of you. Ta-da! So, everything starts here. This is the furnace. That is clear glass. We do not start with colored glass. I'm pretty sure I can vouch and say if Gabe had to make 1,000 pounds of yellow glass, he would go insane. So this is color bar. Now, if you watch them drop some color onto a clear piece of glass, that was color overlay, and this is what they're using, color bar. To take it a little step farther, I keep saying this, if you just smashed it, and I really hope someday that I get to do that. I don't know though. But if you picture this smashed, it looks kind of like aquarium pebbles, those really bright neon pebbles you have in your aquarium, but that is called color frit. Now to continue on this line, if you took that frit and crunched it even smaller into a powder, that is color powder. Now you don't really see them do that a whole lot. Right here, because this is box with that ventilation tube in this corner to my right, that is the powder box. Now the reason there's a ventilation tube in front of there is I think we can all safely agree that we know you do not want to inhale glass, which is why they do it in that corner away from everybody else. Those are about the 3 primary ways. To add design is a little bit deeper. So if you can see this, it looks like it's just a glass rod, but the cross-section view is there's a blue layer and then white. And if you cross-section these into little tiny pieces, and you might roll something in it, you would get this. So those little pieces are called Marini. There's another name for them when they're super intricate, and I cannot remember because all the words for glass are Italian, and this is not my forte, man. Another way is you can take these pieces of cane, heat them, and draw onto glass. Or if you line them all up together, if you see this purple and clear piece behind me, that is cane. They have lined up and melted on a ceramic pad and rolled into that together to make a tube, and then blew it up. Lots and lots and lots and lots of different ways. I think I learn about a new way to add color every single day. This, though, I believe, little twirly cane, I think the word for this is Zanfurico. Now, I did not go to college for this. I'm not an apprentice. I got to make a suck bowl, which all that is you blow a bubble, when you suck it in, boom, there's your suck bowl. I'm a professional now, no. But I did not go to school for this. I just luckily get to explain this all to you, and most of the stuff that I'm telling you, I'm kind of learning as you're learning it. What does the raw material look like? So originally, when we got the stuff to make the Mod Podge of our glass mixture, it was separate, and we would have to make it. Now we get it in a bag, and it comes already made, and we just pour it in, actually, depending on where you're sitting at. So in this exity area, there's these tall steel tubes, and if you can make those out, you will see Nick taking a big bag and pouring stuff in those, and he'll walk it out here and shove them in the furnace. That's called charging the furnace, and that happens about once every 2 weeks. But glass is silica sand, ash, and soda lime. It's silica sand. It's a very pure sand. That is what we use. So if you, I know people have asked, do you like recycle bottles? There are some glass shops that will take glass bottles and things and put them in the furnace and recycle it that way. I know that we don't do that. I do know, I forget what it's called, but some people take like steel rods and put them into the sand, and when lightning strikes them, it creates these like glass things. What? Lightning strikes sand? Fulgurite. See? School, right there. I did recently learn, however, the difference between crystal and glass is that crystal contains lead. Google it. So if you are just joining us and you are gandering and your eyes are wandering and wondering what is on the floor, you will notice there's cake bottoms over there. Now we are going to make the tops for those. Now you can't have these exact ones, but there are some in the gift shop. I believe it was you guys. Somebody was in here and they were asking about that. That's called cap and blow, where they just and start a bubble in the blowpipe. Maybe it wasn't you. Somebody. Yeah, they're gone. So now we are watching Jack begin these tops. Now he's actually from Hilltop Artists, and we are lucky to have him here with us today. So he started this whole process when he was in middle school. And if you live in this area, you might be familiar with Hilltop Artists. You can do the after-school program or actually take glass blowing as a class when you're still in high school. The reason he did that is it helps the bubbles come out, because I've asked. So you just watched him get a gather of glass, and now he is at the pipe cooler. So steel doesn't transfer heat as much as you would think, but it does eventually happen. I do see them going to the pipe cooler almost after every gather. I can't explain why. I'll have to ask and get back to you on that. But usually when they get a gather, you will see them go to the pipe cooler, and that's just running water along that pipe. And there are two. The other one is behind me. So if you are just joining us, you will notice there is a random cake bottom pan just hanging out here on the table. Now they are going to make the tops for these. I don't know how many we will get done. about 4 o'clock, so maybe 1 or 2 or 3. They're pretty fast. If you're watching him, you can see that it's really hot when he opens that door. So the furnace sits at about 2100 degrees, and when you open that door, that is just like when you open your oven and all the heat blasts out, except the blast just doesn't stop. It just keeps going. You can, in fact, cut glass with scissors. If you're wondering what that little wooden thing is that Gabe keeps reaching back to use, that's called a block. That is made out of fruit wood, and the reason it is made out of fruit wood is it burns slower. It is also kept in water because if it wasn't, it would start on fire every time it touched it. Which that does happen a little bit. So you'll notice that there are paddles that they will bring out. Now those will either be used to flatten things or give shape, or if it's being used between the artist's arm and the glass object itself, it is between them for the purpose of protecting that person from the heat. To give you an idea of how hot that glass is, if you see it glowing orange, think about the heating element in your oven. And these pieces come out of a furnace that's 2100 degrees. These torches that are used to heat it are anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 degrees. So imagine how hot that piece stays. That little tool they just used looks similarly to my really bad drawing of it. It is called a caliper, and that is how they know that that topper is going to align with that cake bottom. You know, I think they've probably been doing this long enough. They don't need that, but, you know, just to be safe. And now you have learned how they actually figure out if it's the right size or not. It's not just going in blind. So I believe this is the little pad of glass where they're going to attach the cute little part to pick it up. Sarah, right? That's the little flat pad, and then he's going to put the... So yes, that little... So they're going to squish this little blob, and they are going to punty this piece, which essentially means they're going to transfer it to another rod. Actually, we have the color right there on the pedestal today. So Sarah is going to gather a little glob of some glass on the end of her rod. She's going to stick it on where they just laid that pad down. Now the reason they did that is they're going to attach it, and once they do, they need to break it off of the pipe it's attached to, and then boom, it's on a whole entirely different rod. Now the reason for that is to open the bottom part of this cake pan. They have to do it somehow. They can't do it while it's still attached to the blowpipe. That's not going to work. Which, to put in perspective, the bottom of that cake lid that's going to touch the bottom of that cake pan, that is what is attached to the blowpipe right now. So raise your hand if you noticed the fountain outside. All of you. Not all of you? Where did you come in? You didn't see that beautiful fountain out there and all those awesome sculptures? Now, do you know who did that? So this is Martin Blank, and he is the man that did all that out front. Which also, if you happen to see Gabe, this man sitting at the bench, he is going to get married this month. This doesn't really happen very often either. I really thought it was going to make it. It did one, I thought, but it didn't. So something I actually did learn is clear glass and colored glass is not the same consistency. What makes colored glass, I know for sure that gold, actual gold, like what some of you might be wearing right now, that gives some glass a red color. So different elements are applied to glass to give it that sheen. If you know anything about how ceramics are colored, it's pretty much identical. But yes, clear glass and colored glass, sometimes it's a little difficult to work with together. I'm not the greatest at understanding that. I can explain it a little bit for you. I do know that white is, what's the word I'm looking for, Gabe? It's thicker. White glass is like thicker than clear. What's the word I'm trying to use? So we all learned something together. Where do we get the glass? So most of our glass comes from Germany. However, there are distribution centers in Seattle. Also, we don't do this, but some places recycle glass, like glass bottles and stuff. They will recycle those into the furnace, but we don't do that. Any other questions? Why don't we recycle glass? There's no reason. We just prefer to work with the glass like we have. Some of the glass does get recycled. So it looks like kegs on the floor. Those are not actual kegs. They're not just raging out here on the floor. That has the extra glass. So if you see them take a gather, and it looks like it's dripping into that keg, all that excess glass gets recycled back into the furnace. Once it touches the floor, that's it. It's not like you're at home where we eat the Cheeto 3 seconds off the floor. We don't do that. It's done. No 5-second rule here. If you are just joining us, you missed the excitement. We dropped some glass. But we are going to begin again. Oh, and we do have new faces. We have hello new faces. So, did you walk in from that side? Did you notice the sculptures and that nice little fountain out there? Do you know who did that? I didn't do that. Would be cool. No, I'm not that good. So this is Martin Blank, and he is the man who did all of that out front. I will say the floor is kind of like a hub. You will periodically see a lot of artists come in and out and say hi to everybody. In fact, our other MC was here today, Walt. He's the one that does all these really cool chalk drawings. Not these. Those are mine. They're terrible. But this was Walt. All the other ones that we will pull up, those are done by Walt. Walt also has some art here in our museum. There's some of his in the Tacoma Museum of Art. And speaking of art, in this, off to my right, this man on screen, that's Jack. So he is from Hilltop Artists. And right now at the Museum of Art, it is Gather. And that is going on until September. So that is all of the Hilltop Artist alumni and all the pieces they have created for that. And raise your hand if you've been to the LeMay Museum. The LeMay Car Museum. None of you. Well, you know what? There is a pass right now for $27 that runs until June that you get to come here and the LeMay Car Museum. But that's good till June, which is 27. That's pretty good. A few other things we're doing though. So there is a fusing workshop going on this weekend. That's going to be from 11 to 4. For members and non-members, I think the difference is like $2 or $3. It's not a big difference. Another thing we are doing is if you will love this today and you want to come back, the third Thursday of the month, it is free. And you get to watch the Hilltop Artist, which you will see Jack again. So how much do you think this little blob weighs? Raise your hand if you think it weighs more than 5 pounds. Raise your hand if you think it weighs less than 5 pounds. We're going to find out. I think it's like consensus is 2 pounds or 2.5 pounds. The first time I asked that, the piece they were making, it was like 12 pounds. So what Gabe has in his hand is a caliper, and that just helps them ensure that the size of that cake topper is in line with that cake plate on the bottom. I personally think they can just eyeball it. They're that good, but you know, you always got to be sure. had the top of the bubble done, and they put a little pad of that green.
It's pretty hard to hear in this place.
So they're almost finished with the top of that cake pan, and they put a little pad of green color, and they were going to stick the other rod to that to open up the bottom. And when they did that, because I guess the colored glass didn't want to stick with that clear glass. I learned through this. I really thought it was going to make it though. And this gentleman in the plaid, this is Nick. If you wondered whose job it is to actually fill the furnace with glass, that is what he does. He is in charge of that. He is also in charge of making sure everything back here works. Has to be somebody's job, right? What are the blowpipes made out of? They are made out of steel.
Steel? I thought steel had a lower melting point than glass.
Let me get back to you on that. Stainless steel or high carbon steel. Yeah, actually, Gabe was the one that told me the head of the pipes are different than the rest. So something I wouldn't think that would happen was sometimes they'll break. I can't remember what they're made out of, but that tip is maybe about this much of a difference than the rest of the pipe. One day we actually thought the pipe was going to break. We had this massive piece on the end of it. Luckily it didn't, but that was the day I learned that that can actually happen. Something else I have learned today is that did you know that the furnaces can go out if the power goes out? And one of our artists has to get up out of bed in the middle of the night and come make sure that that doesn't continue to happen. I can't remember exactly what they had said what has to happen, but if the power goes out in this area, somebody has to get up and fix it, which it has happened before. Yes, the furnace, because the furnace has to stay on. So the glory hole, that takes like 40 minutes to fire up. But think, there's 1,000 pounds of glass in the furnace, and if that stops working for like an hour, what's going to happen to that? I haven't quite heard it yet, but sometimes if you're paying attention, you'll hear these little pops that go on right underneath this area, and that's that glass that has fallen. And after it cools, it will. I believe we are going to try this again. The furnace is on 24/7. Glory hole, no, that gets shut off. But what's going to happen to that glass when you shut it off? You have to keep it hot. Yes, so the reheating chamber, there's no glass in there. That is just to put the glass in there to reheat it. It's the furnace that has all the glass. Okay, second round. So next step, Gabe is going to run some water along the point where this bubble is connected to the blowpipe that he has. And it should just pop off. So what that has done is that has caused tiny stress fractures. Woo! We did it! So if you're wondering why Jack is holding two paddles, it's because he is. That piece may look clear and it may not look hot. It is still really hot. And in order to protect Gabe's hand, they will block with those paddles. So now what you're seeing is they're opening up the bottom part, which this is the part that's actually going to be in contact with the top of these cake plates. And that little green pad of glass between that current pipe it is on, what's going to sit on top of that is that cute little circle when you pull it off the cake pan. I think glass shrinks at about 1 or 2%. But it does. If any of you heard that little snap over there, that was a piece of glass poofing. So if you come back and you listen to those little pops, that is that glass that is on the floor that has not cooled properly and it just exploded. Since we are coming to the end of this piece, what do you think happens when it's done? Do you think we just set it on the table and let it cool down? No. So, in front of me is a cute little annealer. He's so cute. Now there's two other ones. Now these both open from the top. The one this is going to is to my left, and those open from the side. Now the annealing oven, that is like twice the heat of your oven at home, so still pretty hot. But these pieces need to cool slowly. That's why we don't leave them out. It cools too fast, that causes thermal shock, and then, so I would say by this time tomorrow, what we've made today will be ready. And you usually know it's time for the annealer because somebody's going to go to this corner and suit up like they're trying to get into a fight with the oven. And the reason for that is you don't just touch that with your bare hands. Someone isn't just going to like hot potato the cake pan topper into the annealer. That's not very safe. That's not OSHA approved at all. What they're going to do is they have Kevlar gloves. There goes my boss. Bye. So there is a box on the floor. It's called the garage. There's really a garage down here. There's like 3 vehicles down here. I'm just kidding. So this is the garage. Now, the garage really is a place where we temporarily park items. What has been in there is the circular part that is going to go on top of this. So the torch, you just see them light. That sucker gets up to like 5,000 degrees, super hot. The one Gabe is using, however, that is the fluffy torch that gets at about around 2,000. So the one he has in his hand, that is propelled by propane. This one to the right is propane and oxygen. And then most of you probably have one of these in your garage, that little yellow container. That's our little map gas. give him a hand.
It's for my wedding. It's in 2 weeks.
Yes, by the way, if you didn't know, Gabe is getting married this month.
Make a couple more lists.
So Sarah made this piece, and they are polishing what she carved into it. She carved it by hand with something, but not her bare hand. But yes, it was kind of matte, and so they've just been blasting it with some heat to, polish it up, and it will go back in the annealer, and it's all done.